Hello, friends. Today, I bring you a funny and absolutely unbelievable story about a man who bought his dream house but ended up with a rather special neighbor. From holes in the fence for surveillance to absurd complaints about the fridge on the terrace, get ready to laugh until you cry at Soren's misadventures and his confrontations with his neighbor. If you thought you had difficult neighbors, wait until you hear this. I'm Soren, and the story I'm about to tell you is one about a dream come true and a misadventure I'll never forget. I'm not bragging, but I'm an entrepreneur. My business is doing well, and that allowed me to do something I've always wanted: buy a house. I'm not talking about some fancy villa, but a modest yet charming house located on a quiet little street, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. I've always dreamed of living in a house, having my own yard, breathing fresh air, and most importantly, getting a few pets to keep me company. No sooner said than done. One day, after months of searching, I found the perfect house. It had a yard big enough for a dog, a few cats, and maybe, who knows, even some rabbits. On the day I moved in, it felt like the universe was conspiring to make everything perfect. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and I looked at my yard with pride, dreaming of the future. After arranging the furniture and planting a few fruit trees in the yard, I got a dog, Rex, and 2 cats, Mimi and Tommy. It was a dreamlike atmosphere. In the morning, I'd drink my coffee in the yard while Rex happily jumped around in the grass and the cats lazily basked in the sun. But things took an unexpected turn one Friday night. It was a quiet evening, and I was getting ready for bed. The house was silent, with only a cricket chirping in the background. Suddenly, Rex started barking furiously. He was unusually agitated, as if trying to tell me something. I went out into the yard with a flashlight but didn't see anything suspicious. Maybe he sensed a stray cat, I thought, and went back inside. I had just fallen asleep when a strange noise woke me up. It sounded like someone was rummaging through the yard. I grabbed the flashlight and went to check again. Rex was standing by the fence, growling. And then I saw it. A shadow jumping over the fence and disappearing into the darkness. Maybe it was just a cat. As I was about to leave, Rex started barking madly toward the fence. I looked up and my heart skipped a beat. In a white robe, vaguely outlined in the twilight, stood a figure watching us with unsettling persistence. Her long hair, fluttering in the wind, partially hid her face, adding to the aura of mystery. I took a deep breath and, with a knot in my stomach, grabbed Rex's collar. I barely managed to drag him back inside, all while feeling like her piercing gaze was following me even beyond the threshold. Although the night seemed to end with that strange encounter, I was about to find out that it was only the beginning of a real nightmare. The next morning, still haunted by the image of the woman in the white robe and disheveled hair, I tried to resume my routine. I told myself I was being paranoid. But I couldn't understand how I hadn't noticed until then that I had a neighbor. Or rather, a neighbor. The house next door had always seemed empty, no lights, no noises, no movement. Well, now I knew it was occupied. And not by just anyone, but by a woman who seemed more like a character from a horror movie than a normal person. Throughout the day, I kept feeling like I was being watched. I'd look toward her window, and even though the curtains were drawn, I had the clear sensation that someone was there, observing me. I forced myself to ignore the thought and continued working in the yard, but Rex, usually cheerful and energetic, didn't seem relaxed at all. He kept staring at the shared fence and growling softly. That evening, as I was about to go inside, I found a note stuck to the garage door. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible. Let me warn you, my yard has rules. Neither you nor your dog are to come near the fence. Do not step on my property or there will be consequences. I was stunned. Who writes something like that to a neighbor? It was clear the woman wasn't all there, but to be honest, I wasn't looking for conflict. So I ignored the note and went about my business. In the following days, the situation escalated. When I went out to water the garden, I'd find crumpled pieces of paper thrown into my yard with similar messages. Don't provoke me. I know what you're doing at night. I'm watching you. I felt like I was in a horror movie. One night I was woken up by the sound of breaking glass. I jumped out of bed and ran to the living room. There was a large rock, with something scratched into it. Mind your own business. It was obvious who the culprit was. I called the police, but, as usual in such situations, there wasn't much they could do. They told me that without clear evidence or witnesses, they couldn't intervene. They advised me to avoid conflict and install surveillance cameras, which I did. After installing the cameras, things took an even stranger turn. The woman seemed fascinated by me. Every evening, I'd see her in the recordings, standing by the fence, staring into my yard for hours. Sometimes she'd mutter incomprehensible things or just stand still as if waiting for something. One day, I decided to treat myself and grill some food. Nothing could have prepared me for the drama that followed. Out of nowhere, I heard a scream that made me jump. My neighbor, who seemed to have a sense of smell as sharp as a hunting dog's, started accusing me of ruining her clothes with the grill smoke. She explained with a vehemence that left me speechless that she had a right to clean air and clothes that smelled only of detergent. Honestly, I don't understand why some people feel the need to impose their own rules on others. Couldn't she just close her windows or hang her clothes somewhere else? After the grill incident, I thought things had calmed down. The woman seemed to mind her own business, and I enjoyed a peaceful period. But the peace was just an illusion. One afternoon, while working in the yard, I heard the gate bell ring. It was her, with an angry expression and a disheveled cat in her arms. "Look what your dog did," she said, holding the cat up to me. The poor cat had a few scratches and patches of missing fur. But Rex couldn't have done that. My dog was always in the yard, and the fence between our properties was solid and tall. "Ma'am, it's impossible for Rex to have hurt your cat. He can't get into your yard." She didn't want to hear my explanations. Before slamming the gate shut with a dramatic gesture, she said, "I'm calling the police. Let's see what you have to say then." The next day, I woke up to the police at my gate. The woman had filed an official complaint against me for animal cruelty. I couldn't believe it. I explained the situation to the officers, showed them how Rex couldn't leave the yard, and even showed them the surveillance footage proving Rex hadn't gone anywhere. The police officers seemed exasperated. It was clear the woman had a personal vendetta against me. They told me they had no grounds to take action against me, but advised me to avoid conflicts as much as possible. "You should consider putting up a taller fence or a partition to prevent further issues," they suggested. A new brilliant idea. I did as the police suggested. I installed a tall partition between our yards, hoping it would put an end to the problems. But she didn't let up. A few days later, I found another note on the gate. "That fence is blocking the light in my garden. I won't let you do whatever you want." It was clear the woman had nothing better to do than make my life difficult. On Sunday, when I was expecting to relax, I had another unexpected visit from my neighbor. This time, she came with an even more serious accusation. My cat had gotten her cat pregnant. I was dumbfounded. How do you explain to someone that a neutered cat can't have kittens? I tried to reason with her, but she refused to listen. In desperation, I called the vet, who provided a certificate confirming my cat was neutered. But even that didn't convince her. So to put an end to this absurd situation, we had to call Animal Protection Services. Thankfully, they were more rational and closed the case. But this whole experience made me realize that sometimes people are so convinced of their own truths that no argument can sway them. But the best part is yet to come. After weeks of scandals and absurd complaints, I had started to get used to my neighbor's theatrics. The holes she kept making in the fence had become routine. I'd patch them up, and she'd make new ones. It was a game that, at some point, even amused me, but I never could have imagined what was coming next. One summer evening, after a long day at work, I sat on the terrace with a cold beer from the infamous fridge my neighbor had complained about so much. It was quiet, suspiciously quiet. Rex was sleeping beside me. Mimi and Tommy were lounging on the windowsill, and I was enjoying this rare moment of peace. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise. It was coming from the fence. I turned off the terrace light to see better. And then I saw her, my neighbor, wearing a bike helmet. Ridiculously small, trying to climb onto an improvised stool made of buckets to scale the fence. "Hey, what are you doing?" I shouted. Instead of answering, she lost her balance and fell spectacularly from the buckets, right into my yard. It was like a scene from a movie, with mud splattering everywhere and Rex jumping around her like crazy. "I'm calling the police!" she screamed, trying to get up. I, barely holding back my laughter, calmly said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you're on my property. I think I'm the one who should be calling the police." After a few more minutes of pointless arguing, the police arrived. My neighbor tried to convince them that I had pulled her over the fence and intended to keep her there. Thankfully, My surveillance cameras had recorded the entire incident, including the part where she climbed like an amateur ninja and landed straight in the mud. The police officers couldn't hide their laughter either. After watching the footage, they sternly warned her that if she ever trespassed again, she'd be charged with breaking and entering. The next morning, I found a note on the fence, written in big red letters. "You haven't won! I'll be back!" I couldn't believe this woman was so determined. It was clear she wasn't giving up easily. However, after the climbing incident, she seemed to avoid direct confrontations. But it didn't last long. One evening, a few days after the climbing episode, I heard strange noises in the yard again. I got up and looked out the window. And what do you know? My neighbor was trying to steal. The fridge from my terrace? Yes, that noisy fridge full of beer. She was slowly pushing it toward the fence, probably planning to drag it into her yard. "What are you doing, woman?" I shouted, rushing outside. She let go of the fridge and started running, muttering something about how she'd take away all my rights as a good neighbor. After this incident, I decided it was time to put an end to her games. I called the police again and requested a restraining order. Thankfully, it was quickly approved. Since then, my life has returned to normal. The neighbor? I haven't seen her much, probably because of the restraining order, but honestly, I don't miss her. I enjoy my beer in peace, without holes in the fence or absurd scandals. But sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I wonder if my dear neighbor is still plotting something. And so, at least for now, my adventure with my special neighbor has come to an end. Life in a house is full of surprises, and I'm sure I won't get bored anytime soon. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more funny misadventures, don't forget to like and share it. Also, leave me a comment. Have you ever had a strange experience with a neighbor? I can't wait to read your stories. See you next time here on Stories with Agnes, where every tale comes to life.